the minimal facts approach to the resurrection. What are minimal facts? Well, this is something that's been advanced. Well, Michael Licona is one. The late Norman Geisler talked about it a lot. And what Gary Habermas is a big one. Gary Habermas and Michael Licona are the two big ones that have really defended this argument. And what it does is it looks to certain historical facts that the overwhelming majority of historians agree did in fact happen. All right. Now, obviously, one of those facts is not Jesus rose from the dead. All right. That would make this podcast really, really quick and really easy, right? Well, all the historians agree he rose, so we should agree he rose. Well, that would also be an appeal to authority fallacy, but we'll get to that maybe later. But no, that historians don't agree with that fact. But they do agree with certain other facts that these things did, in fact, most likely happen in history. And what I have on the screen now are 4 minimal facts. Now, some apologists and some people will add additional facts to this. I'll get to that in a second. But I'm going to kind of stick with these 4 main ones for tonight. Fact number 1, Jesus died by crucifixion. The overwhelming majority of historians, whether they be Christian, whether they be skeptical, non-Christian, Hindu, I don't care, all right? Overwhelming majority of historians will agree that Jesus of Nazareth did in fact die because he was crucified, all right? Second minimal fact, that he was in fact buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. So after he was crucified, his body was taken down from the cross, and it was buried, not just buried, but buried in this particular tomb that owned by Joseph of Arimathea. Fact number 3, on the 3rd day, that tomb was empty. All right, this one is not held by maybe as high of a percentage. If you were to say the first 2 were held by maybe 90 to 95% of historians of the period, I would say number 3, maybe 75% or so of historians, but still a very large majority of historians will agree that on the 3rd day, the tomb was empty. And number 4, on multiple occasions and under different circumstances, different people and groups of people genuinely believed they encountered the risen Jesus. Now, let me be very clear about that one, all right? That one is not saying they did, in fact, encounter the risen Jesus. Obviously, most historians aren't all going to universally agree with that. That'd be the same thing as agreeing the resurrection happened, right? But what they do agree to is that these people who supposedly saw the risen Jesus, they at least genuinely believed it. All right, they weren't making it up. They weren't lying. They at least genuinely thought that they saw the risen Jesus. All right, so like I said, some apologists and other folks will add additional facts to this list. You'll hear people, for example, talk about the Apostle Paul and say that we could add a 5th minimal fact that Paul, who started out as a persecutor of Christians, turned around and became a Christian, not just any old Christian, but the author of 2/3 of the books of the New Testament, right? And other people say the same thing about James, for example. James, the brother of Jesus, who did not believe Jesus was Messiah during his lifetime, sometime after Jesus died, did a complete 180 and also became a leader in the Jerusalem church, right? And we could add those 2. I think those are also very good facts that the overwhelming majority of historians would agree to. But I'm going to, for time purposes, I'm going to focus on these 4 here tonight. All right, so how does the minimal facts approach work? Well, look at these 4 facts. And I want you to think of them, well, I'll give you the example of black holes for a second, all right? Black holes, did you know, are not directly observable, all right? You can't see a black hole. You can't open up a telescope, aim it at the sky, and look and see a black hole because, well, they suck in all light, right? So there's no reflected or refracted light coming out of it. So it's impossible to actually visibly see a black hole. Well, if we can't see a black hole, then how do we know they exist? Well, because we see their effects. All right, we see the the gravitational effects all around them. And then when we see what's happening all around them, we look at those effects and we say, hey, what's the best explanation for those effects? And the best explanation for those effects is the existence of a black hole. That explains everything else we see. All right? It has explanatory power for what we see. And this is a method of reasoning called inference to the best explanation. So sometimes you'll see skeptics who will try to respond to this minimal facts approach saying, you're just using what's called a God of the gaps, where Christians, you're just just arbitrarily inserting God into a gap in our knowledge. Well, if that's what they think is going on, then I hope they don't believe in black holes either, because we're literally using the same methodology. All right, this is a scientific methodology that you look at the effects and ask, okay, what best explains those effects? So what I want you to do now is look at these 4 facts and think of them as effects. All right? If we look at these the same way we do the effects that we use to conclude the existence of a black hole, we have all these other things happening, and we ask, okay, is there a central truth, a central thing that could make sense of all of these? Same thing here. So we look at these 4 minimal facts, and we say, is there a central truth that could explain all 4 of them? Well, obviously, I think, if Jesus did in fact rise from the dead, then that central fact explains all 4 of these other minimal facts, doesn't it? Did Jesus die by crucifixion? Well, that's obviously consistent with the gospel, right? He was buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, also consistent. On the 3rd day, the tomb was empty. Well, of course it was, because he rose from the dead, right? And then on multiple occasions, people genuinely believed they saw the risen Christ. Well, if they really did see the risen Christ, that would explain why they genuinely believed they saw the risen Christ. All right, so if we take these as being effects, and we say, is there a central truth that explains those effects? What is the best explanation for them? Inference is the best explanation. Then we can see that yes, the death and resurrection of Jesus, as is taught by Christianity, does in fact adequately explain all of these facts. And as you'll see, we'll get to at the end of tonight's episode, we then can use these 4 facts to evaluate other potential theories, other potential explanations. So if someone does not believe Jesus rose from the dead, all right, well then what do you think happened? How do you explain these 4 facts? And they offer up some kind of an explanation. Like I said, we'll look at some of them tonight. And then we just compare it to these 4 facts and say, does the explanation that they're offering fit with all 4 of these facts in the same way that the gospel message fits with all 4 of these facts? If so, then the best we as Christians can say is we have 2 competing and equally valid, potentially valid explanations. If not, then they have not yet offered up an explanation that is adequate to explain the data. It's kind of like trying to posit something other than a black hole that doesn't explain all the different gravitational effects that we see. Well, no, it has to explain all the gravitational effects, whatever explanation you come up with. A black hole does that. It has to explain all 4 of these minimal facts. Jesus' death and resurrection does that. Do the skeptical explanations do the same?